Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getitInwriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcast YouTube series.
My guest today is Julie Kathryn. She is a musician, composer, producer. She records and performs under the moniker I Am Snow Angel, which just makes me feel cold right now. She's also a sound designer and a synthesist. She's created presets for Ableton, Splice, Cherry Audio. There's probably others as well that I'm not aware of. And she is the co-founder of Female Frequency, which is, according to the website description, a collective dedicated to empowering women in the music industry. And God knows we can never have too many of those. So nice to meet you. Nice to see you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I think let's talk a little bit about your music. I don't want to dwell too much on talking about music because it's the whole dancing about architecture thing. You know, you can talk about it forever. People should definitely check out your music. What I really like about the stuff that I've heard is that you kind of straddle a lot of different genres. I like the fact that you're not really big on huge power loops and stuff like that. You know, there's a lot of rhythm that happens via arpeggiated riffs and textures and stuff like that. So it's very ethereal, but it's also it's singable. It's, you know, it's like earworms and stuff. So I really do like it, and I would definitely recommend that people check out your music. But let's get into a little bit of your musical background, because that's kind of fascinating based on where you are. Tell me, well, first of all, I guess keyboard is your main instrument?
I think I would say keyboard and guitar, both.
Mm-hmm. And are you formally trained?
I took piano lessons for a long time when I was a kid, so I guess kind of. Mm-hmm. Although I wasn't particularly gifted.
But your wrists don't slack, so that's
no, I don't. And I was always musical. I sang with my dad every day on the way to school.
Are your parents musical as well?
My dad's pretty musical, and my mom likes to sing too. Yeah, they're not. I mean, my dad and I had a thing where he sang certain songs to me every night, and then we sang every day in the morning. And I took piano lessons. I was always just naturally musical. And then I taught myself guitar in high school. And I was really in the traditional singer-songwriter world for a while. So
I know it well.
That's kind of how it started. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of accidentally stumbled into producing my own music. And a friend of mine, Tony Kniff, who's a bass player and producer, and songwriting coach. He was my songwriting coach at the time. And he convinced me to learn Logic. He actually taught me, started teaching me. And I wasn't even that interested, but I accepted the help. And as soon as I started doing it, I just had like a whole new world open up to me as far as incorporating electronic elements into my music. So that was probably like almost 10 years ago.
Well, and that's one of the things that I think happens to a lot of creative people is that, especially if you're a songwriter also, you start thinking in terms of arrangements, you start sort of filling in the gaps in your head, so to speak. And I remember that happened to me with pitching a song to a publisher. Publisher just asked me at one point, well, who does your production? And I said, I guess I do. You just sort of realize that you've gotten into it in that sense,
right. Yeah, it's really seamless with songwriting. Mm-hmm. It's a way to expand songwriting. And that's why I started doing it. And then I realized I love production in and of itself once I stumbled into it.
Well, it has to do with, when I took a recording course for the first time, one of the things that my professor said to the class on the very first day was, you will never listen to music the same way again. And I think it's true. I think we get it sort of makes you get very analytical while at the same time very right-brained. You start filling things in, and you realize that you've gotten into both production and arranging, just because
Yes.
your brain does it in a way.
Yeah. And I can't, like you said, I can't listen to music without thinking like, oh, that's an interesting transition,
Yep.
or that's like an interesting choice for the rhythm section there, or whatever. I can't, it's kind of parallel to my listening experience.
Yeah. And that can be both a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
I mean, I know that I've listened to stuff sometimes where it just kind of irks me, and I think, why did you use that there? Oh my God, I would have done something completely different,
Right. It can be distracting.
Yeah, it can. So I would assume then that, especially with Logic and stuff like that, that probably also introduced you to synthesis in that sense.
Yeah, it did. I'd always been a pretty traditional singer-songwriter, playing like a real piano, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it did introduce me, I started playing like the MIDI synth sounds that were just living inside Logic.
Yep.
And a lot of them are kind of cheesy, but they sounded great to me. It was really fun.
Cheesy can be good.
Cheesy can be good. And I kind of got into it from there, and I'm by no means an expert at all in that area. I think I've just made some inroads just by having a creative palette and being a hard worker, basically. And I'm learning a lot as I go.
Well, I'm interested though in the evolution, because I know that you do a lot of sound design, which is not, it's a different art form than composing music, in the sense that, with music, and especially as a singer-songwriter, you're really accomplishing the 3-minute movie, or at least that's the goal, and especially lyrically, you're telling a story in that sense. And sonically, when you're doing sound design, it's a completely different thing, because there's no particular objective in that sense. I mean, most sound designers are not thinking, oh, I want it to sound like X,
Right.
It's more like, oh, this is kind of cool, and maybe I should play with this, and so, I mean, from your perspective, did you start tweaking sounds, or did you get into modular synthesis, or what was that journey like?
I mean, I feel like for me, the sound design, the type of sound design that I'm doing, it's kind of like a prequel to the songwriting and production. So the way I think about it, it started with tweaking presets that were in, different plugins and in Ableton. And the first sound design thing I did was for Ableton. It was actually for Ableton Live 10, which was probably back in 2017.
Is it that long ago?
Oh my God. Because Live 11 came out last year. I think. I don't know. I don't have a good sense of time, so don't quote me on that.
Well, and especially in the last couple of years, time has been both compressed and expanded in ways that are just not fair. But anyway.
So anyway, it came out at some point, Live 10. And, I remember getting coached by Houston. Do you know Houston Singletary?
Yes, I do.
Okay. He hired me to do the work, and he's been just a great friend and someone who's given me a lot of good opportunities.
It was brilliant. Absolutely.
Yes, he really is. And I've learned a lot from him. And, I learned that the idea with creating the presets is to create, to design a sound that when the user sits down to play it, it immediately inspires them to create a song. Like it makes
That's the challenge, isn't it?
So it is a challenge. It's a great challenge. But what's kind of great about it is I don't have to make the song. I just have to make this, the tools for the people to make the songs. So that's kind of been my goal with the preset design. Like, does this make you feel something when you play it? Like either inspired to write a song or like, emotional or spiritual connection, I feel, this may sound really weird, but I feel a strong spiritual connection when I'm interacting with technology, and I don't,
Oh, I get it. Yeah.
it's, you get it or you don't. So I'm glad you get it. So I think that the cool thing about the sound design in terms of the preset design is that I kind of get to be part of other people's creations, without them knowing or without it really being an official collaboration, that I get to help.
But I think it's interesting. It's, I mean, I'm assuming that this came about basically on your own, working on your own stuff first, right?
I think what happened was, the way I created those first tracks I did, it was this like frenzy of kind of manic all night production. I just couldn't stop. I started and it was like, I couldn't help
I have
myself.
no idea what that's like.
You don't know what that's like, I'm sure.
No, none of us have ever been through that.
I started going down the rabbit hole and I couldn't stop. And what came out of it was kind of like a sound, like this aesthetic that came out that was kind of recognizable to people. And I think that, so I did start doing sound design and shaping soundscapes without even meaning to. It was just part of that kind of late night process. And then I think that when people heard it, it was a little bit of a calling card as far as like, oh, she might be good to have design sounds for this or to make samples for this with that aesthetic.
Now I mean, that's interesting also in that it kind of changes your direction and your objective in a certain way, because you're originally approaching something with the idea of, I'm going to write a song, and the song is going to be this entity, this baby, that we give birth to. And then all of a sudden you realize that, oh, this sound is kind of cool. And maybe it's a completely different direction. I mean, that's a shift in consciousness from a creative standpoint.
It is. I think for me, like, when it comes to music, unless it's ambient, truly ambient music or, certain genres, it doesn't matter. But in a lot of genres, I think the song is the most important thing. It's more important than the production. It's more important than anything.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, I find songwriting arduous and challenging. And it's kind of like, I don't go down the rabbit hole of bliss writing songs. It's like pulling teeth. And I write them, and I'm proud of the songs I write. And I think I've written some that are good. But it's not like this natural flow for me. Actually, I'll take that back. On occasion, a song just arrives to me like a gift from God. And it's,
that's what it is.
Like
it's a channeling through us more than anything else.
Yes. But most of the time it's like editing and, I procrastinate on it, and it's like, it's work. And I have to say that the sound design and sometimes even production, especially if it's not my song, it just flows easily, and I find it really enjoyable. So it is a big shift, but it was kind of a welcome counterpart to the songwriter life.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's something that I have thought about a lot too. I also have worked with a lot of other artists, and I've always found that it's easier for me to work with other artists than it is to work on my own stuff. And, I can totally relate to that. I've written some songs that I'm very, very proud of and have gotten covered and whatnot, but it's much easier for me to have an artist come to me with just, let's say a guitar and a vocal, and, track that, and then I'll put stuff around it and I'll arrange it and everything, because the demands are different.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, you have that objective posture that you don't have on your own stuff, because we're our own worst enemies, especially with creativity.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when it's me, and it's just like me, myself, and I doing everything, there's no one, it's inefficient. I can go really far in these weird directions and then be like, oh, this is awful. I have to
Yep.
start over.
Yep.
And I do like the collaboration with other people because, we can keep each other in check and bounce things off each other. And it's so much more, I don't know, efficient. That's like not a great word to use when it comes to creativity, but it's just, it's less circuitous.
Yeah. And it's less self-critical too.
Yes.
Mhm.
Right. And I don't take it as personally.
Uh-huh.
Like if someone's like, I don't like what you did on this song production wise, I'm like, okay, what should we do? Whereas like if it's like my song and my singing can just feel kind of, when it's not turning out well, it can feel kind of devastating.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, if you don't like it, no one else could possibly like it. And how could you possibly think this is good? It's horrible.
Right. It can get dark.
It's so true. It's so true. So let's talk a little bit about career, because that's, that's something that, especially as we start progressing beyond beginning status on stuff, one never knows where one's going to go. The same way you're talking about with sound design and everything. I think, most of us as younger people, we think, I'm going to be a rock star, or I'm going to be this or that, and then all these other things happen the same way this sound design thing happened with you. Were you really, did you have a different direction in mind for yourself? Did you know what you had in mind?
I think that's an interesting question. I haven't had a clear direction in my life in general. I had another career. I actually went to school for social work, and I was a social worker, and I was playing gigs like open mics with my guitar, and I had a band and stuff. And I just had this feeling like there is a career for me in music. There's a life for me in music. Like I know that, but I didn't have a clear vision of what it was. So I just kind of kept going, and fortunately I've stumbled into, different opportunities that have been satisfying and fun, and that I feel like I'm pretty good at. So it's not really what I envisioned, but I never had a crystal clear vision. I'm not really someone who's great at having goals and then achieving them. I kind of just keep going through life and see what happens.
Yeah, I think I always laugh at that, the old cliche about, life happening while we make other plans and stuff like that. And I think that's so true for so many of us.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that it's a conversation I've had with a lot of students, especially the idea of keeping an open mind to things and really just being present with whatever opportunities are presenting themselves to you.
Yeah.
Because you really never know what's going to come up.
You really never know. And you really never know what's going to be fulfilling artistically. I think that what we think or what I thought I wanted to do isn't, I do remember thinking like, okay, I'm going to tour and play lots of gigs and make a living that way. And I like performing, and I think I get a lot out of it, and people do, but I also struggle with it a lot, as far as I don't know how to explain it, but I get
it's
kind
putting
of
yourself naked in front of the world.
Yeah, kind of. And I like it more now that I have all the gear that I bring with me and surround myself with the gear. But I'm glad that I didn't like hold on to that vision so tightly that I would have missed out on other things.
Yeah, I can understand that, because I think a lot of the opportunities that come to us, we don't even realize that they're opportunities when they come up. Sometimes it's just, and especially the whole networking thing where you meet people, or you meet people who bring these opportunities to you, and when it happens, you might think to yourself, this is nothing, or not even really think about it. And then, a week, a year later, it can come back to you, and just you realize, oh, that experience really contributed to what I'm doing now.
Definitely. Right. I have learned, like meet as many people as you can, and you never know and it's often like later, like you meet someone and then a few years later, an opportunity comes up or you work together, and it's not linear, but it's important.
It's anything but linear. And that, I think, is, I mean, you just put your finger on exactly what it is. You know, there is such an obsession, especially when we're first starting out, with this linear progression of, I'm here, I'm going to get here, you know, and nothing's going to stop me from getting here. And in the meantime, we do this whole, you know, circumlocucious kind of path to there. And all of these other stops along the way are really, they're so meaningful, even if they don't seem to be, because they contribute to who we are in ways that we have no way of knowing at that time. And I mean, I'm sure you never expected to be doing what you're doing now in that sense.
No,
yeah,
not at all.
So talk to me a little bit about, I don't want to get into the idea of being a woman in music just for the sake of, you know, talking about discrimination and everything like that, because we all know that exists, and we acknowledge that, or at least I think most of us who are in touch with reality at all acknowledge that being a woman in the good old boys club that is the music industry can be like running an obstacle course a lot of times. But you've obviously come up with some coping mechanisms. And I think what I see that really fascinates me is the fact that you've subscribed to something that I think, that I see as being very effective, which is to not ignore it, but disempower the whole gender issue, you know? And I think that is so important, because really we all have to work together, you know, and if there is something that is preventing that, it should not be a gender issue. It should be just, do we mesh creatively?
Yeah. But yeah, this is such a multi-layered topic.
Yeah.
I'm
interested in your take on it.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start, but you know, I've enjoyed my journey so far, you know, learning how to navigate that. You know, it's been part of my journey. I've definitely had some bad experiences that were related to my gender. Like you said, that's pretty rampant. I also feel like the landscape is shifting a lot now.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, which is great. I think that it needs to continue to shift. And I think that any conversation of gender inequity in this industry also should include, you know, issues of racism and all sorts of discrimination, because I think that there's an intersection of all those, and it's complicated. So I think you did mention female frequency. That was a big part of my journey when, let's see, I think it was 2015. I was on the Women in Music Google group, and I saw kind of like an ad, or like not an ad, like a request, that a musician named Danny Mari, who now plays under the name Primitive Heart, she wrote an email saying, I'd like to work with a female producer. And I wrote back and said, I'm available. And I don't think that many women wrote back to her. And we got together and started thinking, wouldn't it be fun to make an album that's totally female generated, every part of it, the writing and the production, instrumentation, mastering, everything. And we did it. And it kind of turned into something bigger. You know, we started having events, and all sorts of people came out to them, and, you know, a way to build community. And I think that I realized in doing that, you know, like there are women, there always have been women working in the side of production and the more technical side.
Absolutely.
But the visibility is lacking. So I think that, I also learned there's a group called Female Pressure, which is an international women's collective of women and non-binary producers and DJs. And they had a Tumblr, like a blog at that time, where you could send in photos of yourself working. And it was called Visibility. And there were thousands and thousands of women on there. And also at that time, do you know Erin Barra?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I had been studying Ableton with her. She's like a real, pro. And it was all coming together for me because I realized with her being a woman and being so confident and so into technology, that empowered me. So I think that I've made it, part of my mission is to be visible and to let other women know that there's a place for them.
Yeah.
Along with, just really trying to keep in mind when there's an opportunity to offer it to someone who might be underrepresented, whether or not it's gender or ethnicity or race or whatever. So I think there is a positive way to approach to keep building, equity in this landscape, while also feeling good and positive about it.
Well, and I think that's the point right there, is maintaining the positivity. There are a lot of great organizations that are empowering women right now. We do a lot of stuff with Sound Girls, and there's Audio Mission. And I think one of the things that is important to me is to not just help women feel represented, but also help them feel like there's not, one of the things that frustrated me early on was the idea of creating, or not creating, but enforcing this division, there's enough divisiveness out there already with people, saying, female engineer. I don't call you a male engineer. Why should I call you a female engineer? In that sense. And there is this mentality of, I don't want to work with any men at all because men all suck, And yeah, there's a lot of guys out there who are very unsupportive, and, they should not have the right to work with other women, But I think if we can create a situation that is really gender agnostic, to the point where, I'm not working with you because of your genitalia. I'm working with you because of your talent, and if we can get to that point where, and I know it's, it's very Pollyanna in that sense, but it would be wonderful if we could get to the point where we are not looking at people's gender. We're not looking at people's skin color. We're not looking at people's orientation. We're looking at what is relevant to the working relationship that we have with them. And a lot of the most successful women in our industry have done that, not by isolating themselves with other women, but by disempowering the whole sexism issue completely, and just saying, I am not going to give it any credit at all. I'm not going to acknowledge that it exists. And it's not that we ignore it and it goes away. It's an elephant in the room, and it has to be acknowledged. But at the same time, if we disempower it, if we just say, this is not important to us, it's the first step, I think, in recognizing that we're all just human beings, and we all want to support each other, and we all want to work with each other. And to me, I'd love to see that happening more. I'd love to see more women saying, I'm going to work with whoever I want to work with, whether they're female or male or anywhere in between. I'm looking at talent. I'm looking at creative juices. I'm looking at just whether or not we mesh together as creative individuals. And I think that's so important. And that's why I love organizations like Sound Girls, for example, who are, really, to me, I'm not looking to score points of I'm a supporter or something like that. I'm just looking to work with people who are creative. And I think if we can be doing more of that and more of just encouraging everybody as a creative individual and not thinking about that stuff, God, wouldn't it be a greater world in that sense?
Yes, I would be. I think that is the goal. Yeah, I agree with that. I think, I do think, having lived it, I think there's a good deal of trauma that comes along with some of the misogyny that women face.
No doubt.
That goes
Mm-hmm.
beyond, like, someone being rude or whatever. It can be pretty life altering.
Oh, absolutely.
Career altering. And so I do think that for people who need safe spaces that are women only or whatever, it's pretty important. I don't think that's the ultimate goal, to like have like segregation of genders or anything like that. But I think it's been part of the process. I know that for me, working with, most of the clients I've produced for are women who wanted to work with a woman. And through that process, I've had a chance to get to know myself in an environment where I felt comfortable and safe, and build my confidence. And compared to 5-10 years ago, can now walk into a studio with anyone and hold my own and feel good and not,
tools
not
for
be
empowerment.
flustered.
Yeah. Tools for empowerment.
But it's definitely been, building those tools. Part of that has been, organizing with other women. So, and Sound Girls that you mentioned, Women's Audio Mission, when I started producing, those organizations were there, but in this time, so many more have sprung up, and it definitely feels like there's support and tools and people to talk to. So I think we're moving towards that place where people can feel safe. I also think like some of the kind of more the boys club mentality over time it'll eventually phase out.
One can hope.
I think. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's, part of that, of course, is guys calling each other out on it, which I think has been growing. Thankfully, it's much better than it used to be. But I think, to your point, these organizations are helping a lot of women not just get through that trauma, because I mean, that's very important and very valid statement, but also find those tools for empowering themselves to face that down and to, as I say, disempower it. Because I think that's the most important thing. I mean, we're all going to have to work together, and it would be so much nicer if women didn't have to get their back up and be defensive like that.
Very much.
Because that's what, once a situation like that has been created, then you've got this bad vibe in the room, and that bad vibe is in itself counterproductive to the whole creative process.
Very much.
And so if you can just, if you can just make that, if you can have those tools as a woman to really just make it something that is not valid, it's like, I'm here because of who I am. And I'm here to do a job, basically. Or
also, just know that like, you don't have to work with anyone you don't want to, whoever they are.
Male or female. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I also, this brings me to another thought, which is I do think like the proliferation, is that a word?
Proliferation.
Yeah. Proliferation. Oh God, I'm like, who is it that said nuclear? George W. Bush. Anyway, right. The widespread use of technology so that people can make their own music and learn to be a producer. I think that's also been really important as far as leveling the playing field, because I think for a long time it was like gatekeepers, and there's still obviously a lot of that, but there was like, you have to go to this guy and he's going to make you a star and you're kind of beholden and all that. Like, I think the power differential has become like if you're into making music and you want to put the time in and learn, you can do it.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it more so that people can collaborate with whoever they want. And it's not like one person's holding power and the other one is beholden to them, which is
well, and
important.
it's interesting because that power shift, you know, I mean, in certain ways, I think it's been a big part of that gender shift. On the other hand, you know, it's also, I mean, I've seen situations where, you know, women are brutal to other women in the same way, you know, and which doesn't surprise me because guys can be brutal to other guys too, you know. I mean,
it's to anyone. Right.
It's and it is a knowledge thing, and so that's why I agree with you. I think the idea of putting this power into everyone's hands, you know, if you're willing to put in the time to get the chops, then, you know, you deserve your success.
Yep. Yeah. And you can really learn a lot. Like, it's really like, do you have the time? That's, and obviously resources,
and the dedication.
And the dedication.
You know, I mean, it's really down to motivation. I mean, if you think about, you know, whoever it is, if you're willing to put in that quote unquote 10,000 hours, you know, to become the overnight success.
Right, the overnight success. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but I think that, again, you know, in my perfect world, that's a genderless concept. You know, there are brilliant, artistic, creative people on both sides of the gender gap, and I think being able to empower yourself like that, I mean, you're a great example of somebody closing that gap.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel not when it comes to creative matters, for the most part, in some ways, I don't really feel that gendered right now, especially the more technical work I do on the sound design stuff. I feel just kind of more kind of like a geek more than anything. And then sometimes, you know, sometimes when I notice it in a again, maybe it's not gendered, it's more like a feminine style, which anyone could have, male, female, anything in between, non-binary, is working with artists. You know, things can get very like emotional, for lack of a better word, as far as like exploring songs and performances. And
absolutely, very
that's
intimate.
something I think that, you know, I think people incorporate that regardless, or they can, but I find it really helps the creative process.
It does. And especially when you're working with other artists and when you're going through that creative process of helping them to birth an idea.
Yeah.
I think, you know, there's and you're right, there's a feminine aspect of that and a masculine aspect of that. And I don't think either one is gender exclusive in that sense.
No,
I think
either anyone can use any, right.
Yeah. It's powerful to be able to, you know, for me as a male to be able to pull out that feminine side, and for you as a woman to be able to pull out the, you know, I mean, I think realizing that that's all part of the creative process, that's really what opens it up. And there is this intimacy that we go through in creating art with another human being. And
it's really special.
It really is.
You know, like if someone, it's like an honor to share that with someone.
Yes, it really is. And I think it's so, it goes so far beyond technology to that sense. You know, I mean, it's almost like the technology it's a part of the creative process, but it goes so much deeper than that. And being able to delve into that with someone, that's really key. Yeah,
it really is. And to have that trust.
Yeah. The trust is part of the creative process. And again, I think that is something that it's so wonderful to be able to create that with somebody, regardless of, you know, to be able to shut down those other barriers and just say, we are two human beings working on what's essentially a spiritual plane.
Yeah, it is.
Cool. I love that. I love the way you have transcended that. And I also think it's wonderful that you have gotten into an area that, even though those barriers are breaking down in the music industry, I think sound design has still been a little bit of a boys' club. And
it's lagging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to see you getting involved in that. I'd like to see a lot more sisters getting involved in that, because that is something that also I think the stuff that you're creating, again, has a little bit of a different attitude to it, a little bit of a different aspect to it, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, like, for the synth that you're familiar with, the Cherry Audio Quadra, that just came out, that I think I made about 50 presets for that. And I felt like, naming them is like a lot of the fun.
Yeah.
And like I named one of them Ex-Boyfriend.
Ooh,
yeah. And
I
I feel like I wanted to put my stamp on them a little bit as far as the tone.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And a lot of them were also kind of like metaphysical and spiritual in nature, the sounds and the titles. But yeah, it's nice to diversify the field.
It is.
Yeah.
I like that. So advice for younger people coming up in the industry? What would you tell 15-year-old you?
Oh God, 15-year-old me, I was a mess. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think I'm not. Let me think. I think that, like, this is kind of cliche, but I think perfectionism can be like a real obstacle. Like, I don't think someone has to feel like they know everything about everything before they create a song or produce a song or release it or whatever. I think that jumping in and seeing how it sounds, I think that shouldn't preclude someone from learning as much as they can and doing those 10,000 hours. But like, in the meantime, you can make really cool stuff, and you don't have to be like, this technical whiz or an expert or anything. I made cool stuff singing into my laptop, and it was fun and fulfilling, and people liked it. So I would just say, like, maybe
start ugly. That's what I like to say.
Right. And it might not even be, it might be weird, but that can be cool. So,
no matter how wonderful we think our first efforts are, we're going to listen to them 10 years later and cringe.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's part of the process.
It is.
So yeah, I would say, like, don't wait until you feel like you've got, total control over the situation to get out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just get started.
Yeah.
Very cool. Julie Kathryn, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for having me. This has been great. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.